Ladies, put your boners away or get them ready. I don't know. Either way, you decide, because we have somebody today who is going to tickle your fancy, I'm sure. Okay. Like me. I feel like he is like a little guy version of me. I think he is not afraid to call out the bullshit, right? But also, he is not over here like most of these people jerking off to one side or the other. He will call out both sides. He'll call out all sides. That's what I'm talking about. I know. I told you your boners, they be popping. Okay. So everyone help me in welcoming Connor Moore. Connor is the host of the show, Politically Homeless. And we're going to get it going today. I told him before we hopped on here, I haven't really prepped for this because, like I said, like me, Connor will just balls to the wall, freewheel it. And I'm going to like throw some topics at him and we're just gonna, spit fire in this bitch. So without further ado, hi, Connor.
What's up, Taylor? How you doing?
Connor, are you copying me? Because you have a live free or die sign and I have a live free tattoo. So what's this? Not that you would ever see it.
I have a Latin tattoo that says always true, which is basically the same as live free or no bullshit. So it's like it's been a mantra of mine for a long time. I actually have a sign that says it's all bullshit behind me too.
Are you Latin?
No, I'm just, I was on Adderall and thought it was a good idea.
Cool. Can I share what you did last night?
Yeah, go for it.
Connor said he had a threesome last night. So we both were laughing because I was like, I also had a threesome with my pillow and my stuffed animal. I'm not even kidding. So we're both laughing because we're both like, dragging today a little bit.
A little draggy. It was fun. It was good. It was good.
Is this your normal life? Like, I feel really boring suddenly.
No, it's not. I mean, it is kind of normal life. It's actually now that I'm married, it's harder to find girls who are willing to like cross there. It's anxiety inducing, I think, for a lot of, it's something we've done since probably like 6 months into our relationship. And it's like something we only do together. It's not, people think that it's like crazy and wild. It's not that wild. Like, it's just not that. Oh. It's fun and it's cool. And it can get kind of like weird. Like, I've definitely, I've tied some people up to each other and stuff like that. But it's not the mind, as soon as you think like, oh, this person's outside of like the monogamy world, thinks like, oh, you're going to like swingers parties and you have a sex swing and a dungeon and like all these fucking crazy toys. And that's not how it is at all. It's like, if you were in it, it really flows very easily. And it's like it's just fun. We just have a good time with it. And Kelly, we both like to fuck chicks. So like, here we go.
If you guys are listening and you're not watching, which how dare you get your life right? That's the other thing I was going to say in my intro for you ladies. Like, some would argue Connor is mildly attractive. I mean, I guess like someone may or may not say, but it's funny because I was going to say like, it's too bad, ladies, because he's taken, but I guess it really doesn't matter. But like, I feel like you probably get guys who are like, oh my God, you have the coolest wife ever. Cause yeah, you did just get married. So I can't imagine how many times you get that. They're like, dude. Honestly,
you would think, and these are the things, the funny assumptions you have about like threesome culture, right? Which is like monogamish is what we're into. And it's really fun. But at the same time, most guys like think that they want that until it becomes a reality. And then they're like, oh, I'm super insecure. Like, she's going to leave me for some shit. I'm like, dude, you're fucking retarded. Like, what are we doing here? Like, it's like a woman can offer something that you cannot. You need to first off be okay with that. So like, Kelly can get with women by herself. It's not a big deal. Like, I'm not threatened by that at all. But these guys are like, oh man, this must be so cool. And I'm like, first off, it is kind of a lot of work because a lot of insecurities and stuff come up. But most dudes wouldn't, they just want to hook up with two chicks at the same time. They don't really want that to be a part of their relationship. It's two totally separate things. Like, when I started with the first couple of threesomes I had with roommates, like it just kept happening. I would just like find myself in a place where roommates wanted to sleep with me. And I was like, this is great. But
it just kept happening. He's like, what can I say? Like, they just flocked to me.
I was just in the right place at the right time and open-minded and was like, but you got to shoot your shot. I'm like, what do you guys think about this? Like Kelly and I went on a date the other day funny. With a girl that had a friend in town. I was like, bring her along. And it didn't work. Like, it didn't work out. But it was still like, why the fuck not? Just see what happens. If you just put yourself into the right places with the right people and the right drugs, like, things happen.
Well, first of all, you know, Connor, like you can't say retarded because you'll get canceled. You know, what's funny, you know, even hip hop songs from like Sierra. I was listening to 1-2-Step the other day, and like how many songs and hip hop songs have it. And it's like, now I don't know if they still do, but
well, the Black Eyed Peas, like, let's get it started as
yeah.
Well, and that's the thing. Like, so I actually went on this
changed.
whole tirade on my podcast about reclaiming the word retarded, because we live in a world, right? Like, I could never call someone who has cognitive disabilities retarded. Like,
Right.
it makes me so anxious. To me, like, words evolve and change. Straightforward, right? Retarded was the clinical term for people who had disabilities at a certain time. And then it became a slang term. And now what it means is somebody who's a fully functioning human being just does something stupid. Whereas if you don't take the time out of your day to say, that's a person with Down syndrome, or that's an autistic person, like if you don't it's pretty easy to tell what's going on, or that's a person with special needs. If I ever saw someone call a person with special needs retarded, I would punch them in the face. Even if it's a woman. I'd be like, what do you, like, who the fuck do you think you are? I would defend that to the end of the earth, but it's like, as a word, as a colloquial term, it's like, just shut up. Like, it's fine. And we get everybody's so goddamn sensitive about fucking language. And I'm just like, why are we trying to nerf the culture? These words, it's not Lord Voldemort. Okay. Like, you can say words and it's fine in context, in the right scenario. Doesn't mean that it is the worst case scenario for that word. And we've seen that all the time.
Talk about boners, like any Harry Potter reference, let's just get after it. But like, but it's, you know, I don't want to like do a deep dive into this, but it also has me thinking about the whole Joe Rogan thing, because it's like language and the power of one word. And we're losing sight. Like, people lose their fucking minds because it's like, we don't even look at the context. Also, I'm sorry if you're hearing this, there's literally like a construction John Deere competition going on in my yard. But anyway,
I can't hear it, so I don't think.
Okay, good. So, but yeah, it's like that idea. And it's like the whole Joe Rogan thing with this compilation of him using the N-word. And it's like, even like you could argue the Whoopi Goldberg thing, right? It's like, if someone is not here saying, you know, this group of people, like, you're disgusting or you're bad or you're this or that, it's like, we take it out of context. If they're not saying it in a malicious, derogatory way, it doesn't matter anymore. It's just like, you said it, period. Even if you're singing in a song, like, you said it, period. And it's like, we have to be able to distinguish the two. I mean, really, people.
Yeah, I mean, I can sit here and pretend that I don't sing every fucking word to a Kendrick Lamar song without any question when I'm in my car by myself, or with other people. Even it's like, dude, I don't care. Like, if you want to come at me for that, that's the hill you want to die on. I have years of proof that I have stood up for like the Black community. I think the Black community is way more badass. White culture is kind of fucking boring to me. Like,
You're like, I'm over it.
All the cool shit that is in white culture came from Black culture.
You're like, I'm about to pull a Michael Jackson, flip this script, flip the script in this bitch, surprise. No, but
it's just these highly sensitive people. And then you talk to people like, I went hunting with this guy from Louisiana. He was just a friend of a friend. And it's like, they throw around the N-word down there all the time. Like, Morgan Wallen got in trouble the other day. And it's like, dude, those guys down there. No, a while back. But it was like, if you live in like rural Louisiana, right? It's Theo Vaughn talks about this. It's like just poor white people and poor Black people. They're living their life. They don't really give a shit about what's politically correct in New York, or what Andrew Cuomo has to say about offensive language. Like, suck a bag of dicks, dude. No one cares. And that's the thing. If you grew up in like the uppity suburbs of Chicago, where like things aren't real and you don't experience violence, and you don't like, you have to find a thing to give a fuck about, like you're protecting somebody. When at the end of the day, it's somebody's decision whether they want to be offended about something or not. And just because you use a word doesn't mean you're an oppressor. It depends on how. It's like, context fucking matters. The fact that like context matters is a controversial term is the weirdest thing in my life. It just makes no sense.
Well, that's why with the whole Joe Rogan thing, and I actually was going to get to this in the end, but again, wherever the wind will blow us, it's like, I see it from both ends, because I had my friend on who is Black. She's an entertainment journalist. And she was like, it was right in the height, Connor, of the BLM. Like, this is when I was in LA, and literally they were burning shit like on my porch. Like, it was like in the fucking height. Like, literally we could hear cops in the background. And she's like, listen, I don't want to hear it ever. I don't want to hear you singing it in a song. I don't want to hear you, it's our word. I don't want to, it's not a good period. Right. So I get it from that angle, but then you have people like Amir, who is like, what is his last name?
Amir Odom.
Yes. Who is awesome. And he basically said what you said, when he's like, it's up to us whether we're going to, the individual, if we're going to like let one word hold so much power over us.
Yeah. And it's not like it's a word that gets used commonly anyways. If you're saying that word like every day, unless you're reading Huckleberry Finn out loud every single day, right?
Unless you're reciting
It's like how
in an
often
amphitheater.
does it even happen? But it's an interesting, and that's the thing too, is like if you're into human behavior science and just like kind of fascinated with human beings like I am, it's like, wow, we like took this word that was a slang term and an oppressive term at one point. Now, I mean, just we don't ever talk about the wins too. The Black community took that word, modified it slightly, and now it's like a term of endearment amongst each other. Right. And even between white and Black people in certain communities that are underserved. And like I said, like these like Southern Louisiana boys, they're not offended. You know what I'm saying? Like they just, that's how they talk to each other. And you can't tell me that those guys are racist, because Theo Von had that great bit. He was like, the Black guys would be say like, look at all these things you did to us. And he was like, do you think I would do all those things and move in right next door? But it was just these things where it's like we get so strange, but it's fascinating to look at the evolution of that word and how the behavior around it has changed so much. Just by itself, just analyzing that is really interesting to me. I don't understand why that's a problem in the way that we look at all kinds of things. Like it's just how things have evolved. Like the word cunt, and how it means a different thing here than it means in Australia. You know, like they throw around cunt all the time.
Right. I used to date an Australian, and he, yeah. I'm going to leave it at that. Actually, I was going to go into more detail, but I think he like watches the show. So anyhow, leave that to your imagination. No, but you're right, actually. Cause I remember like him kind of throwing it around. And I was like, like it takes a lot to offend a bitch. And not that I get offended by it, but it's one of those things. It's like, when I hear it, it's like abrasive on my head.
I have a friend who's a PR guy, and they were working with a team out of Australia, and every time they'd have a call with the Australian people, like 5 minutes after the call, they would get an apology email because they're like, oh, sorry, like culturally, but it's a cultural thing. It's just like, it doesn't mean the same thing, you know?
Do you think, okay. And also like my viewers know this, I am by no means like your show, obviously Politically Homeless is much more political than my show. And I always say like, I am not a race relations expert. Let me just put that disclaimer out there. With that said, but obviously, you know, I talk about pop culture and entertainment, and everything that ever happened is political now. But do you think that Joe Rogan should have apologized? Did you see his apology?
I thought the apology was a little bit much. I think I agree. It deserved a little bit more like an explanation. And also that stuff was like 12 years ago. And that's in context of a conversation. I mean, I can't imagine that Joe Rogan, right, is racist or homophobic or transphobic is the silliest thing to me. I'm like, there are real people that are transphobic out there. There are real people that are like getting in the way of trans, like this whole argument over fucking gender neutral bathrooms. I'm like, can we just leave it alone? Like, who
what
cares?
do you mean?
Like the idea of having, like, instead of having a men and a women's bathroom, having two gender neutral bathrooms, right? Like there are people that are like, well, if my daughter goes in there, she's going to get raped by a trans person. I'm like, that's fucking ridiculous. Right. Whereas Joe Rogan had that whole bit where it was like, if you're opposed to gay marriage, you're either an idiot or you think that dicks are secretly delicious. Right. It's like, he made these bits about this stuff and it was like hilarious. Everybody, whenever gay marriage became legal, everybody shared that meme. Right. Like the whole transphobic thing is like, you're trying to make a villain out of somebody. Now it's like, okay, well now Joe Rogan has 11 million listeners on average per episode. And he's having conversations with people that we have tried to shun. So now we've got to go after him and make him a villain. But it's the guy has 2,000 episodes almost to say like, hey, you want context, go find it.
I'm a free speech gal, obviously. Yeah. And so I feel like people conflate that. I feel like people will think like, Taylor, well, what do you think? People can just say whatever the fuck they want, no matter how inflammatory, no matter how what, and never apologize and never take accountability. Like, I'm not saying that. I think that obviously we have to grow. That's why we have to have these conversations. We have to fucking grow and move forward and not be robots. But at the same time, it's like, I don't know. I watched his apology and I kind of was like,
but I empathize with him because the amount of bullshit that guy has to be dealing with right now.
I know.
From all directions. And they're taking some episodes down that don't make any sense, but they also just started releasing his episodes in Saudi Arabia and any of the episodes that were critical of Saudis.
That's my point about growing and learning. It's like, why do we have to go back in time and take things down? Why can't we just be like, okay, acknowledge it happened and keep it moving and move forward?
Well, the thing that pops out to me the most is just like, and this is what I really do on Thought Criminals and and politically homeless, it's just like call bullshit, man. Like I just call bullshit. I've got a bullshit sensor for whatever reason that's really tuned in.
Ditto.
And probably because I was religious growing up and like had to call bullshit on like a third of my life because of all of that shit. I was like, this is silly.
Yeah.
But we look at it, even like the Whoopi Goldberg thing. It's like, I don't think that what she said was all that problematic. I think that if you grew up, and I was like, put it in context for this woman. She was born in 1955. Okay.
I know. I like how you put that. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like that woman experienced like colored water fountains. You know what I'm saying? So like she's going to have a different lens on this whole thing than a Jewish person is going to have, right? On the way that race is treated, because her people were persecuted in a different way than the Jewish people were. So she's going to definitely have a bias towards her own oppression.
Right.
We don't need to have the oppression Olympics. I think that Candace Owens, bringing that up, like Candace Owens doesn't want to admit that what happened to the Native Americans in westward expansion was a Holocaust. She's like, well, Native Americans fought each other, so who cares? We just came and fought them better. And I'm like, so you're a Holocaust denier is what you are, because that was a Holocaust. That was an eradication of a race of people based upon the perception that they were less than. That is a Holocaust by definition. It is as bad as the Holocaust that happened in Germany, right? It's bad as the Nazi Holocaust. And slavery is, we don't need to say which one is fucking worse. They're all just bad, right?
Well, that's what that's what I said in my episode about Whoopi Goldberg, because people are on here on Twitter going, oh, is she saying that, you know, what Black people went through was worse than Jews, are comparing? And I said, first, I agree with you. I'm like, it should not be the victim Olympics. Like it should not be a competition. It's all awful. Again, it's with the context. Just like I think Gina Carano with her meme wasn't being anti-Semitic. That's where I think people are losing focus. It's like, they're not out here. Again, it's like the use of the words. They're not out here being like, let's get all the Jews. The Jews are scum. Let's have them mop our floors. It's like, no, that's not what she's saying. She's acknowledging how horrible it was, just as Gina Carano was. And that's where it's like so out of control, because people, it's like the Joe Rogan thing. People just lose context, and it's like, it's just out of control. It's like, how long do we keep going down this path of just taking everybody out? And what's interesting though, Connor, about what you said about Whoopi is, you know, I have mixed feelings on this, because I did think that it was super cringe, because you had everyone on the right just going out to get her, like making it their life's mission, being like, take out Whoopi Goldberg, you know, an eye for an eye. But I don't know. I feel torn, because part of me is like, isn't it a double standard how they like let some people go and then they punish? If that were anyone else, they would be fucking crucified. They'd lose their agent. They'd live in a dungeon. They'd lose their job. They'd lose literally, like, the IRS would be on it would be a whole thing. And with Whoopi Goldberg, they're like 2 weeks. And I know you argued, like, what was my initial reaction, which is don't suspend her, period. Let her talk. So which is it? Because there is a double standard there.
Well, I think she needed to get dragged a little bit for it, because, and the only reason I say that is because I don't think she needed to get suspended, but the public outcry is like, see what it's like when you're on this side of the situation and how you made a mistake. Right. And then that's why I got so frustrated with the Ben Shapiro thing. Cause I'm like, now you're like, well, on principle, I wouldn't want her to get suspended, but I want her to get fired. And I was like, so you're not a principled actor by definition. You're just like contradicting yourself, which he does all the time.
If people don't know, so Ben Shapiro is obviously, like, if you don't know, again, if like you're living in a swamp, he is a right-wing commentator on the Daily Wire. And he is all against what?
He's Jewish too. That's a big.
And he's Jewish, yes. And he's all against cancel culture, but at a principle, it's like what I wrote in my USA Today op-ed. It's like the left will cancel, but then the right is like, let's cancel them too, so they get a taste of their own medicine, even though we hate cancel culture. So it's that idea with Ben Shapiro. He's like, we don't want her canceled, but at the same time, you do it with everyone else. So go ahead, follow your own rule. Like, it's that idea. And that's what Connor means, how it's
I was bringing up that Sean Hannity on Fox News, right, who is a very cringe individual, is like, I don't want her to get fired or suspended. I was like, Sean Hannity is out here making sense. Like, that's like, you know what I'm saying? It was so strange. And then you look at that, I'm like, so that's what I even said on that video, was like, so you teach your kids 2 wrongs make a right then. That's where you're going with this. You want tit for tat culture, because all they're going to do is like, oh, well, you're going to cancel Whoopi. Now we want to cancel this other person, versus being very loud and using a giant platform to be like, I defend her right to be wrong, which she was wrong and she was ignorant, but it's okay. She was wrong. You can be wrong. It was a very strange thing to me. I mean, it's like the hypocrisy was there, but I think it's kind of blown over, and I think she's going to be fine. I like Whoopi all right. I don't expect, this is what pisses me off about the fucking right wing too. I don't know why they give a shit about what people in Hollywood have to say about anything. It's like liberal Hollywood and this and that. I'm like, when has Hollywood not been liberal and weird?
Well,
Like,
that's
do you remember what David Bowie dressed like? Do you remember when Dennis Rodman wore a dress to the Grammys? Like, what are we talking about here? Like, this is just weird. They're weird fucking people, and they're also rich and hot, and they don't really give a fuck. They say what their fucking publicist wants them to say to get social credit. They don't need to know, and who gives a shit what they say?
That is what is so fascinating to me about how outlets like Fox and Daily Wire, it's so silly because they spend all day long taking the biggest shit on Hollywood. In a lot of ways, I was in Hollywood and I see how hypocritical and how like big of clowns they are, but they also give them so much power because they hang on every word they say. And I'm like, well, by that logic, if you hate these people, why are you giving them the time of day, what they have to say? Who cares? Like, that's what is so... It's funny, and I'm going to reveal this. I haven't ever said this on my show. Funny enough, I talked to the heads of Daily Wire.
Oh, really?
And what's funny is they kind of wanted me. They didn't realize I wasn't in Hollywood anymore, and they kind of wanted me to be there. And my feeling was they wanted me to like get celebs to look stupid and like expose their own. Right, and expose their own liberal hypocrisies. But in my mind, it again was kind of that idea because I'm like, number one, no one's going to invite you guys to anything. No offense. Like they will literally have you with a microphone in the dumpster being like, good luck with that. Like good luck getting a quote from Brad Pitt. But it's also to your point, that idea of why do you want access to celebrities in Hollywood if you spend all day long shitting on their existence? It's so weird to me.
I understand. And they're like, liberal Hollywood this, liberal Hollywood that. I'm like, yeah. And they're influencing our children. I'm like, I don't really care what Lady Gaga has to say about geopolitical issues. Like, I can't imagine. I don't care what most people have to say unless they have insight into something that matters to me. But at the same time, there was a lot of good that came from Hollywood's liberalness too. Like the movie Birdcage, normalizing gay people. When I'm growing up as a small kid in Graham, Texas, which is like watching Will and Grace was my first experience thinking that gay men were normal. And that's a weird thing to say. I was like 10, 11 years old. I mean, I thought Will and Grace was fucking hilarious. And then watching that woman that was in that show get dragged, I forget her name, over being homophobic. I'm like, you have no idea the impact that show had. You have no idea the impact that whole show had on a kid like me who had never had the opportunity to be around any gay couples, gay men. And then honestly, moving to Austin was like one of the coolest things for me because I'm like, oh, like it felt free. That's why I love going to gay bars still as a straight man. I'm like, you're so free. You're so like, they're just they're fucking free, man. And it's cool. And you think that these like conservatives like to tout themselves and stroke themselves off as like this pro freedom party. But I was around, and maybe the younger generation doesn't remember this. I remember whenever it was the Bush era when we were arguing. I mean, Joe fucking Biden in 2008 was like, I oppose gay marriage. You know what I'm saying? And now we're in this place where
how the tides have turned. But this is what I mean about things like we have to acknowledge people and things change. People. I love your view, Connor, because it's really refreshing. Because when you say like, oh, it was my first time at a gay bar. I mean, I grew up an hour outside New York City in Connecticut. I lived in Manhattan, worked at Viacom there in the city, then LA. I've always been in a big city. And so I always, forget.
Dude, and that's one thing with the conservatives too. These guys like Tucker Carlson, for example, which I don't hate, but when Charlie Kirk is another example of these like right-wing commentators. Charlie Kirk is a pussy. Okay. Like I look at that guy, he grew up in a suburb of Chicago, and that motherfucker wants to talk about the working class. I'm like, I'll talk about the working class because I worked 12-hour days as a 15-year-old swinging a fucking hammer in 110-degree heat. So I'll talk to you about the working class. You don't tell me about blue-collar jobs. You've never had one, dude. You grew up in a gated fucking community. But it's like, well, the police, if I called the police, they would come. I'm like, yeah, because you live in a fucking gated community, you dickhead. Are you stupid? Amen to that. It's like, get the fuck out of here. You don't know what it's like. Like my dad spent 7 years in prison. Do you know what that experience is like for nonviolent drug crimes? Do you know what it's like that 15 small town cops busted into his house at night while he was in his underwear and fucking put AR-15s in his face? And like, it's like, dude, do you have any experience with what that is? Because he was an addict? Like, did you don't talk to me about the trife of the fucking working class if you've never seen it and you've never been around it, because all you do is sit around and talk on a stage like anybody gives a fuck what you have to say because you made a troll farm. That's how you got famous. You made a fucking troll farm with interns, and that's how you got famous. You are meaningless, and it fucking pisses me off. Like I take it super personally because those are my friends, right? That's why I defended Trump supporters. Those are my friends I grew up with, okay, and they're not stupid. They're not stupid. They're not backwards, not bigoted. They just are conservatives because they live in a town of 9,000 people like most Americans do. And they don't really give a fuck about all the stuff that's happening in the metropolitan areas because they don't see it or experience it. They just want to live their goddamn life. And they like their simple life out in the middle of fucking nowhere, which I hated, but I understand why they like it.
But yeah, those metro areas though are the ones who like call the shots and speak for everyone. That's why I think Hollywood, I'm going to challenge what you said, because I know it's easy for you to be like, who fucking cares what they have to say, right? But I do think that they have power, and I can't, it's like what you're saying about the Charlie Kirks, like Susan Sarandon. I don't know if you saw this, because this bitch, and I've met her, and you know what, like good times with Susan. I think that we talked actually about like how she sneaks away and has sex with her husband when the kids aren't, I don't know, Connor, you'd appreciate, you and your threesome ways would be all over it. But again, it's like, this is where it's like, they're just so out of touch, because I saw it firsthand. Like I saw their assistants serving caviar on their tongue and wiping their assholes. Like I saw it firsthand. And so you have Susan Sarandon out here. I don't know if you saw this, but she tweeted a meme from that funeral of the NYPD officer who was killed, Jason Rivera. And the meme said, this is what I'm going to tell my kids. This is what fascism is. And Susan Sarandon quoted the meme and said, if you guys don't know, all of the NYPD, that one day there was a funeral because there was a man who was killed. And all of New York City, like the main streets of Manhattan, there were I think like 10,000 officers.
There was a ton of people I saw
for the proceeding. Yeah, it was wild. And she quoted the meme and she tweeted something like, oh, if we don't need police in these, you know, in this block of hours, then why do we need them, period? Like we don't need, you know, that idea. And it's like, shut the fuck up. Hack it without your security guard for one fucking day. One day. Yeah. And that's the thing where it's like, they're so out of touch. It's like, it's so easy for you guys to be like, oh yeah, no police, from your gated community in Calabasas who has security and cameras on call and on your head 24 hours a day. Go walk down a red carpet without a guard. Go, you know what I mean? So it's just like, it's so hypocritical. It drives me nuts.
I give the same amount of fucks about what she has to say. I didn't even know she said that because I'm just not engaged with that. And it's like the police thing. It's like, it's not that. This is what pissed me off about everybody on both sides of that whole, like during the Black Lives Matter, the peak Black Lives Matter thing. It was like either Black Lives Matter or police matter. And can we not just say like, hey, there's a bunch of shitty cops. Black Lives Matter and cops matter. And I also think that like cops have too much unilateral power. I think their spending is out of control. How about this? I would like to see cops get paid more if you spend 10% of your time training in jujitsu or training in nonviolent situations. And everybody's like, well, we need social workers to handle these things. And I'm like, well, how about this? How about cops get paid more if they have a degree in social work? There, I just solved both problems. It's not that fucking complicated. You know what I'm saying? It's like that. You can create incentives for that. I think police budgets are bloated, but you can't address that when you're chanting defund the police. And then you have people like AOC on peak hypocrisy, who then votes to give the Capitol Police $2 billion more a year. What? You were saying defund the police for a whole year right before you voted on that, bitch. What are you doing?
Bitch. The whole thing is, again, we've conflated everything. And I say this on my show all the time. It's like, we can't acknowledge two things can be true at the same time. Like, I get it. Like our brain cells are dwindling and we are struggling to make a thought. I understand, but it's also like, I am with you 100%. And I actually talked about a housewife, Real Housewives. I know this is not your gig. She basically was fired because there were tweets of her or something, posts resurfaced from the height of everything. And basically what she was saying is like, all the rioting and the violence is bad. And she's like, I thought I was standing up against violence, but now she's deemed a racist. And it's like, again, to your point, both things can be true. It's like, yes, of course, Black Lives Matter. Of course, there are some bad cops, but we need cops. Like both things, people.
Like, I marched in the Black Lives Matter protests, and because it matters to me, and I've seen in my own family like the overreach of police officers in a small town in Texas, especially. There's way too many cops. And I went and marched at this the Black Lives Matter here in Denver, and I was like, yeah, this is really important. I also wish they wouldn't bust the fucking windows out of the Capitol and spray paint the shit. You know what I'm saying? Like that doesn't seem productive. I don't know. I think being out here is good. Mm-hmm. And there was a kid that had autism that was killed by the cops here. Elijah McClain, I think his name was. He was a super sweet kid, and it was an absolute tragedy, and that like really kind of got the hearts and minds of everybody across the board, because this kid, I mean, there was no, he was He was autistic, I think, a little bit. Like, he was on the spectrum. He was walking in a hoodie. Some other black kid in a hoodie had done something wrong, and they hit him with, they OD'd him on ketamine because he was freaking out because he didn't like people touching him. And he had just like walked to the store. And that's a thing. Then finally those cops got fired, but that's it. I'm like, those people should have been in fucking jail.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
It's like, it was the EMS that did what the cops told them to do. So it's like, it was a whole thing, but he was just a kid. Like, there was not like, you can have debates. There was no debate. He was just a kid walking home. And so that really pissed a bunch of people off. Here, cops are important. Right. But they need accountability. Like, somebody who has the license to kill people needs accountability.
My last thought on this is, I feel like people don't look at the, you know, like you said, it's either this or that. And there are so many little things. Like, you speak about the story with the kid with autism, and that's awful. I remember when all the riots were happening in LA, there was this immigrant Asian family, and they were on the news, and they were talking about how, like, their struggle to come here and make a living and make a livelihood, and how their entire business was just destroyed. They lost like, you know, $250,000. I think it was like a jewelry business, like a family run jewelry business. And, you know, it broke my heart because my mom's an immigrant, you know, so it's like all these little things that it's like, and I know people say, you know, cost of buildings and businesses and all this, like, it's not the same as a life. And I can understand that. But at the same time, it's like,
but it is,
you know, does it have to be either, you know, what?
Yeah. I mean, destabilizing people's livelihood can cost lives. There's something to be said for that. Like, destabilizing economic, like the COVID response is a great example. How many fucking people in their 20s who lost everything put a fucking gun in their mouth, right? That's a sad thing to think about, but those are human lives. You have to look at the consequences of your actions, and economic destabilization and ruining people's livelihoods does cost lives. Straight up.
I mean,
so you gotta look at it that way.
Yeah, I said that even as it was going on, 100%. Okay, pivoting a little bit on a peppier note. When you talked about before, like, swinging a hammer, I was like, that's a man right there, ladies. You know, that's a man. So, okay, I obviously on my show, I talk a lot about, you know, gender and masculinity and femininity and all this. So, okay, the two things I want to talk about before we wrap, I'm going to have like 10 more minutes, is Adidas with their whole titty campaign and Candace Owens. So, okay, maybe we'll save Adidas for the grand finale shebang. Let's talk about Candace Owens. It's funny because this whole app was reversed. Everything we just did was going to be my end. And you know what? That's what happens when you live in the moment. So what can you say, YOLO? So, all right, Candace Owens, I just want your hot take on this. Basically, this bitch is out here, and I need someone to make it make sense, because she is on this whole tirade about how feminism is bad, and feminism is a conspiracy theory, essentially led by the government to ruin households, to take women away from the households. So this way kids don't have hands-on parenting, and the government can corrupt and brainwash our kids. So she's like, feminism is bad. It is the devil. And I'm over here like, bitch, you realize nobody is benefiting from feminism more than you. Okay. You have everything that he's nodding. You have everything that a feminism is. You have your home life. You have your kid. You're having a second kid, but you're over here crushing it, probably making a shit ton of money as this talk show host, as this political commentator. You're clearly a businesswoman and passionate about all of this. I bet you one day she'll run for office. So you wouldn't have any of that shit, bitch. If it wasn't for feminism, you would have to work so much harder, right? To be having your own talk shows, to run for office. So make it make sense, Connor. What is the sitch?
Okay. So the feminism piece is, it's actually, we're going to embrace a little bit of nuance here. So birth control changed everything. You got to look at the history of this. Once you could reliably not get pregnant, more women were able to join the workforce, right? We don't think about that because that was kind of before our time. So now you essentially double the workforce, okay? Which does, when you double the workforce, bring wages down. So I do think that now, do I think this isn't a feminine issue? I think it should be more possible for single income households to exist. I don't care if it's the woman or the man. And I will say this as someone, my wife has the money, okay? That I'm doing about masculinity. Like, yeah, I'm a relatively masculine dude. She has the money. Before we met, I was trying to buy a sick van to live in. And then I was going to build a house out of container boxes on a 5-acre piece of property that I found somewhere. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's where I was at. And now I live on 3.5 acres in Golden, Colorado. Okay. So I'm honest about that. I will be the primary parent for a lot of things. So especially when our kids are a little bit older, right? Like 3, 4, 5, when we're working on that right now. So like, it's a little bit of a reversal, but it's awesome because our kids have somebody present, which is really important. And there are studies out that show that putting kids in pre-K, 3, 4, 5 years old, right, pre-kindergarten, actually it puts them at a disadvantage going forward. And a lot of that is the way that it's structured. So we have to like embrace, there are some valid points in that, but she's equating that all to feminism versus what I look at is like the working class is underserved, right? So you can't, it's almost impossible to have that single income household. But what you're seeing is these people fleeing major cities to go live in a place, right, where they're all of a sudden their mortgage is half of what it was. So they can have someone present with the kids at home. Right. So that it may be the man or the woman. I have a friend of mine. It was one of my old clients back in the day. He owned a construction company and he made like $170,000 a year. Right. But his wife was a fucking neurosurgeon. So when they had kids, he was like, I'm the doctor's wife. Like that's what he did. She was making $350,000, $400,000 a year. So it's like he sold his business and was like, now I'm a stay-at-home dad. Now he coaches like a strongman. He's an awesome, amazing dude, amazing father. Right. So I think normalizing a single income household, whether it's the woman or the man, depending on what it is, and more women go to college now. The gender pay gap is kind of eradicated in most areas, except if you try to compare like offshore oil workers to teachers, that doesn't really add up. But there is a point to some of that. That being said, she's saying she wants to make it a conspiracy theory because that's attention seeking, right? She's a grifter by definition. She switched a lot of her views to the complete opposite end. She changed her principles completely. That doesn't happen naturally. That's not a way to go about it. And I think that she got where she is, and she doesn't ever acknowledge that. Like she is in many ways the token black chick for conservative speak. I don't think that's a problem. It is what it is. Like if like there's for Candace Owens, there's 100 white chicks who say the same shit. Do they have a show on the Daily Wire? Why is that? Right? But she'll criticize Joe Biden for saying that he wants to put a black woman on the Supreme Court. When really, even though they didn't declare it, the Daily Wire wanted a black chick who said what they wanted her to say. Right? So what's the difference? Really, what's the difference? And I don't mind that, but it's like, look at this whole thing and you're going to blame feminism when you wouldn't have a talk show. You're telling me the same government that at one point didn't want to allow women to vote, right? Women had to fight to vote. That's what I'm
talking about.
You're saying that same organization, right, which is still mostly a bunch of fucking white dudes, is trying to bring up feminism as some kind of conspiracy so they can co-opt your children. And it's always new mothers who say this kind of dumb shit. Right. I had this other woman who'd been a mom for 3 weeks and was like, children aren't a burden. And I'm like, children are by definition a burden. Like she's a conservative. She's on Fox News sometimes. And we got in this whole debate about children being a burden. I'm like, yeah, they are. Be honest about it. Lots of things are a burden. Working out is a burden, right? A job is a burden. Right. These are all burden, but it's like, are they worth it? Like you have to understand like life is a game of sacrifices. So like, yeah, you're sacrificing things by having children or not, but it could be amazing. Right. And so there's so much nuance to that, but it's so much easier to write fucking, and Ben Shapiro does the same thing, is like feminism is ruining our children. And it's like, okay, I'll click on that. And then you get your YouTube ad money.
It's just so silly because it's like it's that point. It's like you literally, however many years ago, literally couldn't cast your ballot, bitch. And I guarantee next thing you know, she's going to be running for office. So it's like,
yeah.
And now you have all of her, to me, it's just so 1950s. Like now you have all of her, followers writing these things like, I'm the CEO of my home and blah, blah, blah. And that's great. And that's dandy. And that's fine if that's the life you want to lead. But I just don't understand how it's why she has to make it her personal mission to like bring down something she benefits from. It's like,
it doesn't need to make sense. Like, right, I would say, it makes sense if you don't think about it. When you look at it, like you're looking at it as a woman being like, dude, you benefited from all these women who put their necks out. And to be honest, like there's this book, the American history, or the, what the fuck is it called? I got it back here.
Oh my God. Look at your man bun.
The People's History of the United States. Women get undervalued in many things. You know who some of the biggest anti-slavery proponents were back in the day? Well, fucking white women. Right. And they had to go to these protests and they had to sit behind a curtain. They had to sit behind a curtain because they're not supposed to be in these places to speak up. It was the weirdest, crazy fucking shit. And you don't ever hear those kind of stories at all.
Yeah.
But they understood what it was like to be kind of oppressed and marginalized because they were property.
Yeah.
And not in the same way that slaves were, by no stretch of the imagination, right? But marriage at that time was a property transfer. So like they could empathize with that more, and they stood up, right? And you don't think about that kind of thing. We don't have those kind of discussions. But women put their fucking neck on the line so that you could have your goddamn talk show, Candace. So why don't you like have a little bit of respect? Have a little bit of fucking respect for the people that came before you. You know what I mean? Next thing she's gonna be like, well, Rosa Parks is kind of overrated. You're like, what?
No,
fucking...
I literally wouldn't be surprised. Like she'll have it on a t-shirt. She will have it on a t-shirt. Mark my words. No.
Rosa Parks was a grifter. Like what?
No. I need an explanation.
It's the same people who were like Martin Luther King had mistresses, and I'm like, who fucking cares, dude? I don't give a shit that he was like, I don't care. What? That doesn't have anything to do with anything.
No, I know.
Discredit movements.
But it goes into everything we say, both of us say on our shows. It's like we can be complex individuals. What a concept. Wow, I'm mind blown. Wait, so really quick. Okay, lastly, we're getting into Adidas. You are first though, you're trying to have kids, you guys, you and your wife. Would you still have threesomes with kids?
With our children present?
No, once you have them.
Yeah, we've talked about that quite a bit. Of course, things change because there's kids around. It not for a while. Obviously, we got to get to a place where Kelly feels good in her body again, which shouldn't take long. I think she'll bounce back. She's 6'1", so she's gonna be like, I think it'll be easier for her to. Yeah, she played volleyball at USC.
Oh my gosh.
So I think she'll bounce back, but I think it's gonna be really fun. She's gonna get because she's got big hips. She's gonna get big. It's gonna be really funny. But I think when she starts feeling good about herself, like she gets more out of it than I do oftentimes. Like a lot of it is for her. She like really likes to melt into that like feminine puddle of just like ooey gooey love. You know what I mean? Where I don't offer that. And that's one of the things that balances us out because I am pretty masculine. So
I think that's,
as time goes on, and we'll get a nanny in a hotel room. Like it's fun, like
done.
A babysitter. It's like not that
done.
big. It's kind of fun. And it's also, especially when because we're going to be enmeshed and like we're both work from home. We're going to be parenting the fuck out of ourselves. Like it's going to be nice to get like a weekend away and go like have a playtime,
I give you guys props for being so open about it because I am single, but I talk about this a lot. And in my future, I'm like, we're drilled into our heads so much. Like you have to do it the traditional way, like I'm pestered about it by my family every 5 milliseconds of the day. Like someone blow my brains out, but I think about it a lot. I'm like, I don't know if I could do it. Like not that I'm some, like I'm a nun, not that I'm some like crazy sex swing, promiscuous lady, but I don't know. It's just the idea of like being with one person and that's it and forever. I just like variety is the spice of life. And I hate, I won't even sign up to a gym commitment membership. I'm like, it's too much commitment. So it's like weird because it's like, I want the traditional thing, but also it's like, I don't know if I could do it.
We'll use this as a way to seed people over to Thought Criminals. We're going to talk about this a little bit more.
Okay, cool. Okay. So lastly, we're going to do a thing on Connor's Patreon, right? Connor
it's a public episode.
Oh, woo. Okay.
It's pre-launch. Yeah.
Okay, good. Okay. Adidas showing all these titties doing the most. So Adidas launched a campaign on Twitter showing, I don't know, like 20 plus pairs of woman titties, all colors, shapes, sizes in order to promote their new bras. And their whole thing is like, their boobs come in all shapes and sizes and we're going to support them. And I saw this as a chick whose boobs are plastered in Playboy. And I was just like, why? What is the reason? And here's why. I say this a lot, but it's like, how is something going to make a statement if everyone is so shameless and so over the top in making a statement? Like, are you guys at Adidas? Are you okay? What did you think when you saw it?
Kelly loved it. Kelly thought it was great. I did
think it was refreshing because it was like real boobs. It wasn't the fake plastic up to your chin. It was very, very, I thought that was refreshing, but.
Well, and I think there's I think there's some things to go a little bit over the board. Like I have a friend who's a plus size model, right? And she would be like considered obese, but she's not obese. She's just like, she's a thick bitch. She's sexy as hell. And there's a difference in that. And I think like we can use this is kind of extrapolated into like mannequins that are bigger than like a size 2, right? Like things like that. I'm like, I think that's all great. And also most titties look like those titties on that picture. So I'm like, I think it was for their marketing fantastic because Adidas isn't like the most popular sports bra brand, and Adidas is actually a brand that serves like their stuff's a little cheaper, so you're serving like a different. It's not like Lululemon. Lululemon could never pull that off. But I think for a company,
because the people who wear that, their tits are fake now.
Yeah, exactly.
They're like, I don't recognize.
But I think, I think in that way, I think that's something that brings a lot of insecurity out of people. But like, titties are titties, man. And I thought it was kind of cool. And I think it was a really brilliant marketing move because they like it's going to be in the news cycle for a couple of days, but they just straight went for it. It wasn't necessarily even like body positivity. It's like, here are what most titties look like. And we want to make bras for these titties, lopsided, small, big, nipples facing down, nipples facing sideways, whatever it is. Like, you can put those things in these bras and go try to better yourself at the gym.
It reminded me though, it made me reminisce on like iconic statements from like the 80s and 90s that weren't, I don't know. It's like, it was subtle and effortless, cool, chic. It wasn't trying so hard. Like Got Milk. Remember Got Milk? So it's like, I don't know. To me, it's like, again, how extreme do we go? Like, where is the subtlety? Where is a little bit of mystery? And then you also have people on Twitter being like, everything is tit for tat, right? So people are like, oh, this would never go the way you're showing tits. Okay, where are the dicks? And it's just like, oh my God, people, like, I don't know.
But
I don't know.
I think one thing too, I've seen this a lot with like pussies too. And like labias, different labias. And dude, women get super insecure about what the pussies look like for some reason. Like I dated a girl who was like really having a hard time. She actually ended up getting like a labiaplasty.
Oh wow!
Once upon a time. It was like a whole thing, and I was like, dude, it's fine. Like I like it. Like
yeah, but now she feels like a fucking rock star, and she's like, "Come and get it, boys."
Yeah, exactly. I think it was a whole thing. I mean, that was after we broke up, so I never really experienced that. But I was kind of glad I didn't. I'm like, I got the real thing, But I think that I don't know, man. I feel like. I do feel, and I, as a man, I don't really know what this is about, right? But like, I feel like women have been kind of fucked over as far as some of that stuff goes. Like, the way that women are portrayed in most things, it's gotten better, I think. But even Hollywood, to kind of piggyback on what we were saying earlier, it's like if you go back and watch movies from the '90s, people kind of looked like real people. Right. Every character, I know. And you go watch like The Sopranos, for example, like the cast of The Sopranos look like real fucking people.
All of them, Friends. I talked about recently, like Cindy Crawford and Playboy, no plastic surgery, no big lips, no
Heidi Klum
small
back
nose.
in the day.
Yeah.
And it's just like, there's something about that. Like I actually have a friend who's a model and she has like a bump on her nose and her whole family has it. And somebody came at her in the DMs and she was like, fuck you. This is like a thing. My brother has it. My mom has it. Both my sisters have it. It's like a thing that gives my face character. And I'm like, fuck yeah, girl. Like it would be so easy. It would cost you $5,000 to go in there and just shave that down. That's like the easiest nose surgery you could get. And she's like, fuck you guys. I'm not doing it. She was like, this is like part of what gives my face character. And I don't want to look like that. And I think that there was like so much of a push there for people to try to look like, J-Lo's 50 now or whatever. And she looks the same as she did when she was 30. Like that's unrealistic for a lot of people. And I think, I wish, that's why I even like people like Lady Gaga, who's kind of weird looking, but she's hot. But she has a kind of her own thing going on. And it's like, oh, that's cool.
Well, we're losing like that uniqueness. And this is where women like myself are put kind of in a bind because on one end of it, look, like I have my moles. I've never done anything. I've never even done Botox. I have one boob that's bigger than the other, like represent. But this is where we're in a bind because it's like, on one end of it, it's like, yeah, women do your thing. Like the friend with the labia, like do what you have to do to feel better. But then on the other end of it, part of me wants to call it out. And I have called it out, like the Kardashians and all this, like perpetuating this unrealistic, like this Barbie. And yet again, if you call that out though, then you're not a feminist because you're not empowering women because you're calling women out. Even if you're calling them out in the hopes of helping other women not feeling like it's look like that. So it's like a lose. It's like,
where I get weird is like anything that's like normalizing physical attributes that no one had anything to do with, right? Like you didn't make your titties what they were. They just kind of are. Like I didn't choose to have great bone structure and be 6'4". It just kind of happened. Right. But I was also an obese child. So
ladies, not all at once. I didn't choose this life.
It's different because like I was a fat kid. So I got bullied when I was a kid. I couldn't talk to girls. If I wanted to like ask a girl to a dance in junior high, I would be like sweating and nervous and they'd always say no. And I tried. So like for me now being like an attractive man, it's like, I'm like, this is like, I'm playing a video game. It doesn't even feel like real. Like I'm going to snap out of it one day and just be a little fat kid again. So I kind of grew out of it and I worked my ass off. And part of the thing I get upset about is like when people try to normalize something that's objectively unhealthy, right? Like obesity, for example, because I lived that life and I'm like, guys, I'm telling you right now, like you need to sort this shit out. We need to like normalize being able to go to the gym as an obese person and not feel ashamed of yourself. That's good. Right. We can normalize being thick, like a thick guy, thick women. Like there's guys that weigh 250, 270 pounds who are fit. You know what I mean? You can talk about offensive and defensive linemen in the NFL. Those are thick guys. They're thick boys. That's fine. But when you're talking about obesity and stuff like that, that's where I started getting up in arms. But when you're talking about like normalizing someone having a bump on their nose or lopsided titties or a flat ass, like, I'm like, oh, I mean, that's just genetics. Like, not much you can do about that. And I don't think that Kardashian, like, getting, you know, the best ass surgery in the world, and somebody's like, I want that ass, and they go to Miami and go to one of these like strip mall ass injection places, and they get a fucking infection and die, and like they're just churning people in and out. There's a show called Traffic. They talk about that, and I'm like, man, that's fucking people up.
Well, that's where it bugs me, because it's like they pass it off as real, and it's like, you guys have the best of the best, you know, surgeons, this, that, or the other thing. And like Susie down in Miami, she's about to get fucked. She doesn't know, like, you know, wrongful advertising. So yeah, it's Connor. Okay, we're going to wrap this, but your thing about obesity, I mean, this is what I mean. And this is how I'm going to wrap it with the whole shameless advertising, the Adidas. Do you remember that campaign Cosmopolitan did where they had obese models, and they were like, and they literally said, this is healthy. So again, it's like that idea of like this shamelessness on all sides. What?
That pissed me off pretty bad. I was pretty upset by that.
So, because you're past too.
Yeah. And I've seen it kill people in my family. Like that died at like 45, 50. It's like dead. All right. See ya.
That's sad. That's where it's like, where
terrible.
does it become a problem?
Yeah,
like
so
it's like chic and cool, but not like.
Yeah, exactly. Okay,
Connor Moore, we're about to hit it up for part 1 or 2, depending on who releases what first. What?
Thought Criminals coming up.
Thought Criminals. I'm sorry I went over our time, but I mean, can you blame me? Can you blame me? Okay, Connor, thank you. I'll see you in just 1 second.
Okay.